this is the same day. I just had my dose of special Indonesian herbs to address my health. Hopefully that will make me less likely to cough in the rest of this session. So again, this is going to be part 3 of this, what's turning out to be a pretty long story. I don't know if anybody's actually going to want to sit through and listen to this, but I feel compelled to do it. So where were we? We were at the second night of the ceremony. This night it felt like I was more in tune with everything, and I was learning that not forcing this energy. I'd felt this energy the night before, and it was like, wow, I've got some new power or something like that, and I was trying to push it places. The second night, I just let it be used. And this second night of ceremony was like there were so many people. The first night, the people, there had been about 20 people in this retreat. And the first night, except for the musicians, the leaders were all kind of confused. The people that were there were like befuddled and didn't really feel like it had been a very good experience the first night. Were very upset by it and shaken, I would say is the word. Hit by something that they didn't know how to process. I guess maybe you could put it. Many people had thrown up profusely and kind of had not a very good experience that first night of ceremony, except, like I said, for the musicians that I sort of jammed with at the end. Now, the second night was very different. I went in thinking, I felt like that first night was my fault, that there was something I'd done wrong with this energy that came out, and I felt kind of bad. So the second night, I said, well, I'm just going to let it work on me. Not expecting anything, not pushing anything. I don't really have any intention. I don't have anything I want for myself. I felt like I'd been pretty selfish with what I wanted out of this experience, and selfish in the first night. All this stuff being given to me, and my first thought was to try to use it, to try to control it. And I thought, that's not me. I'm not, I don't want to be a tyrant. I don't want to have power over others and be able to control and manipulate or anything. I don't want this power. I don't want this gift. I'm going to use it passively, if anything, because the words of that entity stuck. Use it wisely. You've been given a great gift. Use it wisely. So the second night, I just was participating. I was going with the flow. And it was such a harmonious night. I experienced not too much personally. I was mostly just communing with the energy of the room. I did at some point get the visions I had a little bit. I missed telling you about this in the first ceremony. Towards the end of the active psychedelic experience, I got to where I was just like observing the multiverse, all these constellations, all these symbols and things kind of just in the heavens around me. And so much to process. I couldn't really focus on anything, but just realizing that this is kind of showing me the structure of the universe / multiverse. And I could observe it. I couldn't make much sense of it, but both times that was like the final part of the psychedelic experience, was feeling like I'm getting to observe a snapshot of the multiverse. Anyway, the second night, nothing particularly earth-shattering happened for me, but I noticed everybody else was like, "Whoa, this was the best ceremony. Oh, God, it makes last night worth it." Was kind of the feeling that I got from the folks after that. And then people started packing up and going their separate ways, and getting in their cars and leaving, and I'd taken a Uber to the place. I caught one back and started the phase of processing what I'd learned. I tell you, there was a euphoria after the experience. I didn't know quite what I'd learned, but it was like, wow, this is incredible. And like I said, after that, I started being able to watch some of the conflicting messaging around what was going on in the world today and yesterday and tomorrow, the predictions of futures that many people are trying to make now, and the discussions they're having around the future of humanity and what's going to happen with AI, what's going to happen with technology, what's going to happen with the systems of control that people are using to use and abuse us. And I would watch these things, and it was almost like a little voice within me would say, no, that's not true. That's not the way it went down. It was like this. And this wasn't an other voice. This was like a me voice, if you will. People talk about communing with a higher self. I guess that's how you'd put it. I had within me a connection to that soul that had all my collected memories and experiences, and which seemed to have gone back to the very beginning, because I would watch things about cosmology, arguments folks were having about the start of the universe, the nature of the universe, the nature of matter, the nature of consciousness. And I would listen to these experts and people maybe that I was already familiar with their work and had great admiration for them. One of the authors that I had actually used his picture as an avatar at one point was Bertrand Russell, one of the most famous atheist intellectuals that ever lived. And yet now I was like, okay, a lot of the people that I'd had as heroes, as mentors, I looked up to as this person must know what's what, because they sound so convincing. And I began to be able to pick apart holes in what they were espousing and seeing, no, you don't quite have it right, or you've carried this assumption too far. And I started realizing that my mission was to write about truth. The truth of religion, the truth of our history, the truth of the history of the whole multiverse, the truth of the history of all souls, to set straight a lot of the misinterpretations and lies that had been propounded by people, well-meaning people, who just got things sort of wrong. At any rate, processing this, it was a slow and arduous process of, gathering information and processing it to see, well, there's so much of what I used to think I knew, I now know is on shaky ground. So I've got to review a lot of things that I'd kind of taken for granted. And I spent even more time after this searching on YouTube, pulling different content, pulling things that I'd never thought of looking at before, looking at the political situation in new ways, with a much more open mind than I'd had before. And mind you, I'd been a person that has changed their mind on a lot of things over time. So it's not something that was new to me, but it was now I had a much more firm basis for changing my mind. I realized that in many cases, the changes of mind that I thought I'd made were being made for me by programming. That, my shift from the values of my upbringing in a very conservative home with very traditional American European parents were being changed and programmed by media, and had actually turned me from, being a pretty much classical liberal conservative to being one of the cult that had been programmed to think that they were the good guys, that they were going to get America finally going right, that everything that happened with our history was bad and horrible and needed to be destroyed and rebuilt in a new image, build back better. This is why I like to throw a lot of righteous anger at ideas like that. I began to see through what was going on with the programming that I'd been getting from birth. Now, I had some inkling that something was going on, like I said, when I disconnected from it for long periods of time, first in Germany and then to a lesser extent in China, because when I was in China, the internet was already very active, and I was in a country that was actually promoting and orchestrating much of the propaganda that was being fed. And it was during my time in China that I actually, for a while, was one of these people that thought, wow, China's so great, you can do anything. We started this theater company, it was completely illegal, and we got away with so much, blah, 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 blah. Well, I'll tell you one more Chinese experience that kind of set me. I didn't realize it at the time, but it later on told me that, whoa, I've been really hoodwinked and programmed by media that I've been consuming. I used to go to this DVD place on the DVD street of DVD sellers back when bootleg DVDs were being made by the billions in China. And nobody was doing anything about it. Nobody was complaining that the Chinese needed to stop. Maybe they were a little bit, but they were doing this hoping that eventually they could get Chinese hooked on Western media and get them to start consuming their propaganda, commercialist propaganda, on top of the state propaganda that was already going on. Well, what the Western commercialists didn't realize was that the real programming was happening in the entertainment, changing culturally the values of the West to basically make them open to a communist revolution that would basically destabilize that country and allow the power people to step in with a even more authoritarian government, which is essentially what communism and Marxism is all about. Okay, back to my story though. After about 3 months of processing this, I started feeling like I needed to start writing something. I started writing a book. And the first book was going to be kind of like just what I'm doing right now, describing what happened to me and what I felt it was leading me to, and some of the ideas that had come up during this time. One of the ideas that I came up with and published was an open letter to Jeff Bezos. suggesting that he take a portion of his empire and create a new product, Amazon Spirit, which dealt in spiritual currency and allowed people to contribute to the spiritual awakening of the planet by exchanging real things for spiritual currency. Whatever you have, make available, you exchange it for something somebody else has, and both sides earn through some algorithm amount of spiritual points, which they can then spend to on philanthropy to support their favorite causes or whatever. Kind of a spiritual economy is what I was thinking of. Nothing ever came of it, and I'm not sure if anybody actually ever read it. But this is kind of where I was at in the first 3 months of integration. And then I had what I term my day with Loki. I was still living in Norwalk with my soon-to-be ex, and taking care of my daughter. And my soon-to-be ex was off working, traveling, and was supposed to get home that day. And I'd been watching YouTube. I actually that was the day that Eloise had started preschool, so she had about 5 or 6 hours where I had to myself. It was really great. I would watch stuff and read stuff and sometimes doze off or kind of zone out. That day I'd happened to catch a YouTube video about hypnosis, and kind of half watching it because I was doing 3 or 4 other things at the time, as I often do. I've been, up to this point, somebody who tries to multitask to get more done. And I since learned that that's not a very good thing. I think that was the source of a lot of the stress that led to some of what happened during this integration period. At any rate, this day went by. My ex got home, or soon-to-be ex, and we said, I was still hopeful that the divorce wouldn't happen, the marriage would finally come back together, and I was still working along those lines. At any rate, she came back, and we decided, let's go for sushi for dinner. And we went to our favorite sushi place, and I got there, and it was like being possessed. Some other force took over, and I began kind of hallucinating that I was doing this hypnosis thing that I witnessed earlier. And I started giving suggestions to other people in the restaurant, and kind of messing with them. And if you know me, this is not something I would do. I don't know what came over me that day. I call it my day with Loki. Anyway, I made a big nuisance of myself in that restaurant, to the point we finally had to leave. Shortly after our food arrived, they packaged it up and asked us to leave. And after nearly getting the crap beat out of me by some of the people in the restaurant that didn't like what I was doing, and it was like, wow, what the heck is going on here? We got out of the restaurant, and it's like I was really shaken, because it was like somebody had taken over my body, my mind. I got a first-hand taste of what possession is like. We got to the car, and got home. We were home about to eat the rest of the sushi that we hadn't eaten and try to get Eloise to bed. And there's a knock on the door, and there's 3 policemen outside. I don't know how they got there. At the time, I thought maybe somebody in the restaurant had followed me home or something like that. In hindsight, I'm pretty sure it was my wife, second wife, who called them and reported me and wanted them to take me away. Now, mind you, at this point, the whole thing was over, and it was like, wow, that was weird. I don't know, I was like very apologetic. I don't know what came over me, but I'm really sorry that all that happened. And, I thought that was the end of it, but apparently, I think my wife called the cops and had them take me, and they were acting like I was literally a psycho. They were scared. They had their hands on their guns, and were, making me scared too. And they held me there at my door, and then a little bit later, a guy came up with a gurney, and I was like, what's going on here, guys? I'm sorry. I don't know what happened at this restaurant, but believe me, it's not going to happen again. They weren't having any of it. They strapped me down to that gurney and hauled me off to the local hospital. Did a whole bunch of tests. I think because I'd done the ayahuasca thing, my ex thought maybe I was eliminating a few of these little ants that crawl over my desk. Sorry, you guys are going to have a better life. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they did a bunch of drug testing on me and released me the next morning, and I was instructed to start seeing a therapist. Okay. Well, after this incident, I guess my wife / soon-to-be ex decided, well, I'm not going to deal with this. I've got to get this horrible soon-to-be ex-husband away where somebody else can deal with anything like this, because I'm not dealing with it anymore. So she decided to ask for a transfer to Colorado, where my older kids and ex-wife, first ex, were living, thinking that she could draw on the support of them to take me off her shoulders while she still wanted me to take care of Eloise because that was useful to her. Anyway, suddenly we find ourselves moving back to Colorado, a place I never thought I'd get to live again, and a chance to be close to my older kids, which was great. And there, she bought another house, and I was still living there, taking care of Eloise, while the divorce proceeded along at its merry, merry pace. During this time, I felt compelled to write again, and I didn't like what was going on with the first book I'd written. It was too self-focused, I thought, and I was learning so much more and discovering so much more as this kind of truthing of content that I would consume gave me new insights. So I thought, I need some inspiration to get going here. I really want to visit ayahuasca again. I can't take time off for a ceremony, and I'd started realizing that there were people out there saying you can make it yourself. And I thought, well, cool. I could get the ingredients and I could make it, and I could, stealthily have a little ceremony of my own during the night when Eloise is sleeping, and very cautiously explore further, see if I can put together what's really going on here, all these loose ends that I don't seem to be able to tie together to form a coherent action plan. So I bought the ingredients, I made the brew while Leanne was on her usual weekly business trip, and then picked a night to partake. The first time I was very careful, only took a small dose, and had only a few really weird pictures come in my mind, which I really don't know the significance of. The second time, I took a little larger dose, and it was very different than the first ayahuasca experience. And this was with different materials too. This is with Syrian rue and Acacia confusa, which are two plants that are very frequently used in Chinese medicine, for instance. And so they're readily available, each used separately, but if you cook them into two separate teas and then drink the teas, you effectively mix a form of DMT-bearing liquid in your body, which is the way you should do it, because it's the legal way to have ayahuasca somewhere where it's been made illegal, an illegal substance. At any rate, the second time I had just random images again, but then the day after I felt like, I know what I need to write. It's like I need to correct the Old Testament, write a new Bible in my own way. And this is the genesis of my first book, published on Amazon. And it's not the be-all, end-all. I actually have had 2 or 3 more major periods of revelation since I wrote that book. And I've revised the book several times. I don't know, I might again. Because I'm learning more all the time. And this philosophy, religion that I preach, is one that is absolutely founded on changing your beliefs if in the face of overwhelming evidence that something's not right. And so when I get new insight, I modify. And this is why various recounts that I've made of the early history of souls have had some slight nuances. I understand much better now what was going on. I'm understanding better and better what the plan was, which is helping me understand who I am, and who essentially we all are. At any rate, I wrote this book. I wrote it during a very furtive, roughly 6 or 7 days of activity where I was still, taking care of Eloise most of the time. So my book writing was limited to my free time when my soon-to-be ex was back from her trips, and or when I had free time when Eloise was in kindergarten or she was playing. And I have to admit that during those 6 days of feverish writing, I didn't take care of her as well as I had before. I let her spend more time watching TV, watching good TV, good content that I know she liked and would be useful from YouTube, educational, early Disney stuff that wasn't full of propaganda. I fed her, I took care of her, I made sure she got in bed. But the day I finished the first draft of the book, was the day that Eloise's mom was going to return from her business trip. And I thought, well, I'm just going to take this day off. And I really feel like I should keep Eloise home from preschool and just spend the day with her, doing fun stuff and, being her good old dad. We had a wonderful day together, and at one point we were laughing so hard that at home I would just, run around in my underwear. I've never been a person who likes to wear a lot of clothes. And so we were sitting there on the couch laughing and playing together. And, My wife is calling. Hey, babe. You on your way?
What are you doing?
I'm podcasting.
Why you do not text me every morning? I'm so worried.
Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I wanted to get this podcast done before you got back.
Yeah, but you need to text me when you wake up.
Okay, I'm sorry, my baby. I love you. You can spank me when you get home, okay?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
I'm worried if you do not text me or calling me.
Oh, don't worry. I was just very anxious to get this podcast done.
I love you so
I
much.
love you too. I'm sorry, sweetie.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Okay, I will. How soon are you gonna be back? Hmm?
Apa?
How late are you gonna be back? Are you already on the road?
In the night.
Oh, at night. Okay.
Today my car cannot.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Hello. Okay, I've got to get back to my podcast.
Okay, I love you so much, baby.
I love you too, my sweetie. I'll see you soon. Bye.
I love you.
I love you. Okay, sorry for that little diversion. At any rate, we were sitting on the couch laughing so hard that I had a little accident. As you get older, these things happen. Sometimes I drink too much coffee, and if you drink too much coffee, you get more than you bargained for, if you know what I mean. And I had a little accident, seep through my underwear and get on this couch that was my ex's pride and joy. I did the best I could to clean and thought nothing of it at the time. We had a great day together when her mom got home. I just wanted to tell somebody what a great experience it was. I finished this writing I was working on, and I finally got what was going on, and I wanted to talk to somebody. And I told what was going on. I told about this day to my ex, and I mentioned how, we were laughing so hard I accidentally pooped on your couch. And she went ballistic. Thought I was being an irresponsible parent. She was so mad at me that she contrived to get me out of the house and locked me out. And so here I am outside the house. I can't get in. What's going on here? All I did was try to tell you honestly what was going on. There's nothing to be so upset about. But she was just like ballistically crazy, mad, and shortly thereafter, a police car came up. The guys got out and asked if I was so-and-so and handcuffed me and took me away for a stint at the mental hospital. And I spent 2 weeks in a mental hospital in Colorado, having done nothing more than had 6 days of high creativity, followed by a 7th day of rest with my child. And punished by 2 weeks in a mental hospital, which is not much fun. No access to technology of any kind. Navigating this weird system of living in incarceration, basically. Being subjected to the analysis of psychologists, psychiatrists, pumped full of drugs, against your will, without any permission. Interesting experience. I actually look back on it fondly, though, because I met a lot of the other people that were there and got to know them, got to hear their stories, got to hear what was going on, why their families thought they were crazy and put them there. or society had thought they were crazy and put them there. And I'm telling you that the people running mental institutions, on the average, are more crazy than the people that are in them. This is first-hand observation, first-hand knowledge. And most of what they do in these institutions is not helpful at all. It serves the vanity of the people that made the laws and the people that enforce the laws. And yeah, there are wonderful doctors, there are wonderful psychiatrists, there are wonderful psychologists, but most of them don't work in these institutions. The ones in the institutions are people that should be institutionalized. They enjoy the power they have over people. They enjoy making a mockery of what's going on with these people. Their spiritual visions are hallucinations to them. They're, oh, you're such a loser. They don't say that, but that's the way they treat people in those institutions. And by the end of 2 weeks, people were coming to me for therapy, having long discussions about their problems, opening up and sharing, what they'd experienced and how they were trying to deal with it. Being possessed by demons, being possessed by ghosts, having horrible fixations with body weight and image and stuff like that. Some of the younger women there, and dealing with that. I mean, I learned more in 2 weeks in a mental asylum than most people learn in a lifetime about human nature and about the wide variety of experience that is possible and does happen and is very real. At least real to the person that's experiencing it. And having experienced very unusual spiritual things firsthand in my life, I tend to credit them rather than dismiss them. Now, does that mean that there aren't people that are faking in the spiritual community, that are making up stories about UFOs, that are making up stories about meeting spirit guides? And of course there are people who are delusional, who are just getting attention, trying to make a buck out of some made-up story that they did, but that doesn't describe all of the people. The sincere ones have these real experiences. And I would encourage you at this point to have a look at an old movie, Ingrid Bergman movie, Joan of Arc. One of the best documented lives of somebody essentially having a Messiah life ever, because she was tried twice. First by a relatively friendly court of ecclesiastical court to decide if her visions were true, and second by a very unfriendly ecclesiastical court in British hands, English hands, to condemn her as a witch. And this is all well documented, thoroughly documented by people who had no read. I mean, you can read both sides of the story, so it's not like many things in history that people say, well, that was just written that way because they were the powerful ones, they were the white supremacists, so of course they captured it from their point of view, which is a very common theme among the woke cult these days, which is very pervasive. And I can tell you that politicizing history, politicizing the truth, politicizing religion is a very evil agenda. And they're all a spiritual agenda, because thought is spirit. If politics becomes central to your spirit, this is essentially the essence of your God. The God that you are trying to make of yourself, and the God you follow as the fearless leader. All is spiritual. At any rate, I have spent a total of 4 periods in mental hospitals. In every case, I'm realizing now, it was my wives. I've been twice in Indonesia so far because this wonderful lady you just heard me talking to freaked out when I've had these periods of revelation. Because what seems to be the pattern is I'll get a download of new information, and I'll be like, wow, I gotta write this. And then this Loki force will take over for a while and make me do something. And it's the things I've done have been, this first one I described was like this hypnosis, weird time at the restaurant. But since then, they've become more focused and more spiritual. The second time happened the week of my second divorce. I was under a lot of stress because of that, and because I'd taken a job and I was back being a project manager. It was a pretty good company, but a very stressful project. And this week, all the stress pushed me into kind of that mode. And I got a bunch of revelations, but I also got this urge to see what it was like to be a homeless person. To go be homeless and see if I could emulate Jesus and have myself a Last Supper. See if I could find a restaurant that would let me gather 13 chairs together and pull together a group of people to recreate the Last Supper in this modern era. Pretty strange week. Yeah, that landed me again in the mental hospital. This is the only time that wasn't directly caused by a spouse. This time it was, I was sitting outside the restaurant that I tried to set up this Last Supper, saying that I wouldn't leave. This is a public sidewalk. I'm going to sit here and keep waiting for what is going to happen. And the police came up and started talking to me, and eventually put me the whole routine, which I was already familiar with, of handcuffing me, putting me on gurney, and taking me for drug testing at one hospital, finding that I had nothing in my system, and then sending me to the mental hospital again for a second 2 weeks. Which I knew the system there pretty well already, and I actually had more fun the second time and met a whole new cast of characters. As these places go, nobody stays for very long before they try to get them on some kind of an outpatient basis. Anyway, I got pretty good at being in that environment. And I learned a lot from that second experience, not quite as much as from the first, because it was like, okay, been here, done that. There's some people here that, would like to engage with me that I don't really feel I need to engage with. One of the most memorable people of that second stint was a guy I was roommated with. He was a black guy, athlete, that I guess had anger issues. And I don't know what possessed him to put him in as a roomie of this old white guy, because this was in the, when all the Black Lives Matter stuff was heating up and neo-racism was becoming the thing of the day. But this black guy, my roommate, he realized, I think he knew he'd done something pretty bad, because he just spent the whole day in his bed, didn't get up for meals, didn't do anything, and I tried to make sure he got his meals and help him out. I said, do you need anything? He wasn't very communicative at the first, but I think he was there for about a total of a week, so he got out fairly quickly. I don't know what his story was really, but when he left, uh, he gave me a big hug, and he said, "Do you need anything?" And I said, "Well, you know, I don't have any clothes of my own, so maybe if you got an extra shirt you'd like to give me." And he gave me one of his jerseys that he liked, that he brought along for his stuff. And we hugged and I think cried a little bit, and he went on his merry way. But I really felt like just by being there for him, not pushing, not trying to treat him, just being another human being in a similar situation, somehow really, really moved him. And we bonded in a way that he didn't bond with anybody else during the time he was in that hospital. So anyway, you can have memorable experiences. You can have wonderful things come out of the darkest things in your life. And that's another characteristic that I think doing this talk is going to give you an idea of how to recognize when you're in a Messiah life. It's not all roses. It doesn't mean that you have to be out there preaching and turning water into wine and doing miracles. It means that you just need to be learning and growing and following the synchronicities, the patterns. If you push against them, if it's something that needs to happen in your life, you're going to keep getting it. You're going to keep getting hint after hint after hint. The more you bang your wall against what you need to do in a Messiah life, the more you're going to be drawn toward it. And this is, around this point is when I realized that I didn't need to push it. My goal, my gift was not to be a pusher, but an experiencer of this life. Process it, do what I need to do when I feel compelled to do it. And that's the way my life has been ever since. At some point, after I wrote that first book, I felt compelled to start podcasting and give my message that way in the format that you're seeing now. And maybe people will see it, maybe they won't. Maybe it'll be deleted from YouTube tomorrow, but now I've got it mirroring on Rumble, so maybe it will persist somewhere and somebody will sometime will get something out of it. As I've been podcasting, Amazon came out with this new thing called Kindle Vella, which allows authors to publish in a serial format, kind of like it was with the magazines where Dickens published his novels. Many people don't realize that Dickens wrote his novels as serials, 1 or 2 chapters at a time, with a general idea where the story was going, but having publication deadlines to put a chapter in each edition of the magazine, the journal that he was publishing these works in. So I love Kindle Vella. I think it's a great thing. It allows, I've started putting up essays there instead of writing a whole separate book. And some of them are my poetry, some of them are essays on what I think about certain topics. Some of them are, of the spiritual revelation variety. I'll keep adding to that probably. I'm not going to ever write another real book. Maybe I'll just keep putting things in my Kindle Vella collection. Again, and I don't know if anybody's reading it. I don't get much in royalties. It was kind of nice at first because to make this Kindle Vella thing take off, they actually were paying people for putting up each episode, even if it hadn't been viewed yet. I got a check from Amazon for, I think, $130 one month, which was pretty nice. The month I did most of my writing. I haven't made any money from my YouTube channel. Do I expect to? Probably not. I know what I talk about is not mainstream, probably not popular. You may connect with it on one topic, and then you'll follow another episode of what I'm talking about, and you'll totally disconnect. You'll say, wow, that's completely against what I believe, and shut off completely. Maybe I'm taking the wrong path to introducing what I have to share with the world. I don't know. I just know I have to share it. Do I need to tell you anything more? I think I started yesterday giving you a little taste of, my travels in retirement, how I've gotten to spend time getting familiar, really living in Colombia. Now I'm really living in Indonesia and getting experience that most people never get of a foreign country. If all you've ever done is go on vacation, go sightseeing, you have not experienced that other country. You know nothing about their culture. You know nothing about their politics. You know nothing. And this I have to tell you about, especially a country like China, and about Russia too. If you're one of those that think Putin is a wonderful guy for doing what he's doing and being the strong man, standing up to Europe, you are getting fed a line of bullshit. The guy is a psycho. He's a megalomaniac who has killed thousands and thousands of his own people, who would willfully destroy his own economy, destroy the lives of many people in his country for his personal agenda. He's not a hero. Xi Jinping is not a hero. Fucking Comrade Biden is no hero. He's a 48-year-plus career sellout who's been an easy-to-buy vote in the Senate and was the easiest to manipulate vice president to send on any mission that Obama didn't want to get attached to his image of the first black president, even though he's not really black. He's mixed. Now what's up with that? This neo-racist idea that if your skin is a little bit dark, then you get to be black. But if you're white, which I'm not white, am I? I'm kind of cream-colored. Oh, but I'm a white supremacist, and I'm an old white guy, so I'm like the devil incarnate. These people are insane. They are fucking insane, and they have been fed and consumed a line of neo-Marxist bullshit that is destroying this world. It's polarizing the world. And it is making enemies of the very people that we should be teaming up with you to defeat the real enemies, the tyrants who want to turn this world, this species, into a slave planet again. And yes, it has been a slave planet. But that is a dark agenda in itself. The people that are saying, well, oh, there is no God. There were these aliens that came and made slaves of us. And now there's some of them that are the nice guys, and they're going to bring us into the age and let us join the Galactic Federation. These are other agendas that are not necessarily true. Yes, there are other species out there. There have been other God species, as I've told you, that have great technology and have advanced to a very high level of consciousness. But they've also done so during a time when the real God was reincarnating himself. They don't know their own history, and they are just as confused as humanity about the nature of God, the nature of creation, the divine plan. And they are pulling people into their dark agendas for power. Either anti-establishment power or establishment power. And they are both serving the dark side by doing so. Anyone who thinks if my side just got enough power, everything would be perfect, is a potential tyrant, and would be a tyrant if they got that power. You've got to stop listening to Pied Pipers. You've got to stop following leaders who, if they were speaking honestly, think of you as lemmings. They would lead you off a cliff in a moment if it would facilitate their rise to power. And believing in a God, an authoritarian God that's almighty, all-powerful, could do anything, and is your best friend, this is dangerous belief. Christianity is a very dangerous belief. Atheism is a dangerous belief. Cosmic oneness is a dangerous belief. They are all elitist in nature. They all put one thing above everything else. This is not how God designed souls to work with each other. If you think like that, if you act like that, you're a detriment to creation. You're going to be constantly getting in the way of implementation of ideas that were better thought out, more honestly presented, more sincerely implemented. This is why I often point to the foundation of the United States as an imperfect perfection, but it was doing a lot of the things that people realized they needed to do to set up a pretty good government. They didn't think of everything, and consequently the Constitution kind of fell by the wayside. But that doesn't mean you need to throw the whole thing out, baby with the bathwater, which is what many want to do today. And many want to do with their lives. They get on a spiritual jag, and all of a sudden it's all cosmic oneness and love and light. And they ignore anything that doesn't fit into that mindset. When you ignore reality, when you ignore counterexamples to your belief system, you are letting yourself be programmed. You are letting yourself form a mass where your head should have been, where your brain should have been. We are deep in the middle of mass formation. This time, not a single mass of the Nazi Party, but multiple masses. The Chinese Communist Party, the deep state establishment of the USA, the UN, the corporate elite who think that they know better than anybody else what's good for the world. These are all delusional masses. And meaning many different meanings. Mass is weight. It's also ceremony, dogma, beliefs. When I go to Mass as a Catholic, I think I'm doing something good just because I go listen to this liturgy that is in Latin that I don't even understand a single word of. Now, how silly is that? And we're doing the same thing with all the new religions we're creating ritual and dogma built out of nothing useful. People meditating their way to nirvana when nirvana doesn't exist. It's a psychological construct made by Buddhists who wanted to have an excuse to sit around and meditate and pontificate all day long while people brought them food and built monasteries for them and gave them this nice cushy life that Dalai Lama enjoys still, even though he's abandoned his country. These are not the people you want to follow, folks. These are willingly or unwillingly serving the dark side. They don't know the first thing about creation. They don't know the first thing about God. They don't know the first thing about what a soul is and what it's capable of and why we have laws like reincarnation and karma. Why we can't turn water into wine like maybe we used to be able to do. Can't happen anymore. Try it. Sit down and devote the rest of your life to turning water into wine. Knock yourself out. It's not going to happen. Why? Because laws evolve. The multiverse evolves. It evolves scientifically. It evolves to work in a more methodical pattern that doesn't allow souls to get so much power that they can control others' minds by doing cheap tricks. And the people that are, out pursuing spirituality, thinking they're going to gain powers, oh, we can get together the whole world in a prayer and we'll just force the world to be a better place. These people are delusional. They're insane. That's not the way spiritual energy works. You could get every single soul on the planet brainwashed into your way of thinking, your cosmic oneness cult, and hold a whole world prayer that everybody was required to attend, and give them detailed instructions of what they were supposed to think, and watch them in their groups to make sure that they were focusing their spiritual energy. You wouldn't be successful in accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish, because there's only so many human souls, and the number of human souls is just the smallest drop in a bucket compared to the total number of souls in the multiverse. And like it or not, the virtual souls, the zero-level souls in God's universe, run according to God's programming. God's universe is a universe of laws. It's a universe of physics. It's a universe of chemistry. Wasn't always that way. That's why we have stories of supernatural powers and things like that. And there's still some people that can use latent spiritual powers to wow audiences and do things like hypnotize a whole audience. Yes, that is a spiritual thing. It's not something that everybody can do. These powers can be misused, and they're given to some people as a test, whether they can handle the spiritual power. Most of them can't, and in their next incarnation, they aren't given the opportunity to have so much power. This is how we identify souls that don't deserve to rise to the spiritual levels, that don't deserve to rise to the God levels. Now, some have in the past, because the laws have changed. That's why I talk a lot about the old gods still being around. Some of them have never incarnated. Some of them are still in this space of thought, controlling things with the vast spiritual energies that these older souls have through their experience. But their influence is waning as the balance of spirits are bound to reincarnation and karma. And the ones bound at the most fundamental level are operating according to the laws of the multiverse, not according to the laws even of the God of the universe they live in. When you become a god, you do get your own universe of creation, but it has laws. It has restrictions. It has boundaries. This is why I don't fear Borg. I don't fear the dark gods. I don't fear the dark female god. The fairy godmother that promises you candy canes and delivers you into subjection to the female perfection. Or the Lucifers of the world who want to dominate you in a male perfection. I don't fear any of that. Doesn't mean I have to support their agendas, and I oppose them, as you should. Opposing tyranny is a holy act. Trying to help other souls and your own soul from being sucked into a dystopian mind control world, that's a noble act. That's something that's worthy of reward. This is how to be a good soul. Not by bowing down to Allah and repeating prayers 5 times a day. There's nothing good about that. It shows that you are devoted to a system of programming. And yes, there are many wonderful, good Muslims who are very devout and follow all the practices. But they're not good because they're following those practices. They're good because they have good, experienced souls that are learning the right lessons from being incarnated in a human form in a Muslim culture. And there are just as many evil Muslims. Same goes for any other religion. And this is one of the things that I preach most, is that you cannot cling to one set of beliefs and think that you've made it. Oh, I'm a Buddhist, I believe in enlightenment, and I study with my guru every time, and I work so hard to meditate, and I'm trying to kill my ego, so I'm good. Oh, fuck you. This is insane. You guys are nuts. And I don't mind telling you that. And you're going to get mad at me for it and maybe not tune into my channel, but you need to hear it. You need to hear it often, that you're off in the weeds on a wrong path and you're wasting the life that you've been given. You're wasting many of the opportunities you've been given to grow by pretending you don't have a soul, pretending you don't have an ego. This is a lie. The ego is the soul. It's inseparable. We all have our own personality. God has his own personalities, and he's not perfect. He likes some things better than the other. He plays favorites. Sue him. That's why he doesn't take all the power. That's why he doesn't operate as an authoritarian micromanager, because he's humble enough and wise enough to know that even if he himself, the first soul, was in charge, it wouldn't be perfection. It would be an authoritarian dystopia written along his lines. Now, he does influence his universe pretty heavily. And his universe is the universe of final integration of new laws. Especially the big laws have to be proved in his universe before they're accepted. And if they're only in a certain universe of the creator of that idea, they can still exist in that universe, but they're not going to be allowed to spread. The universe is a great thing. It gives you creative powers as a god, but it also limits you because it puts your creations within a limited sphere. Now, maybe each black hole is another universe. This is a theory that's been proposed. I won't say one way or another, but I think it's true. It feels true to me that the black holes we observe are essentially the universes of new gods. They are constrained to live within this greater universe that is, well, it's interesting because it's not really God's universe. God had the idea, but as I tell you, there was a volunteer that embodied it, the Lucifer archetype. I'll give it that name. Names didn't exist then. They didn't need to exist. The anti-universe is the Lilith archetype, male, female. Now, that doesn't mean that females are bad and males are good. It just means that the prototype of this pattern was this argument between order and chaos, between free creation and bound creation, between no authority and absolute authority. And anybody that has thought about it knows that there is the happy medium is the best place. Okay, you cannot ever find one person that could run the entire world, the entire universe, well. If you think there is, if you think there's such a God, you're dumb. You don't understand the first thing about consciousness. You don't understand the first thing about creation. You don't understand the first thing about how anything meaningful and useful gets accomplished. It gets accomplished through cooperation, through testing and trial and error to find out what works and discard what doesn't work. And it doesn't work on just saying, oh, well, I like this idea. I think it's going to work because I saw a meme and, oh, if everybody was like that, everything would be perfect. Let's just force everybody to be one. This is how these people are thinking. It's dangerous. It's communist thinking. Eastern spirituality, Eastern philosophy is very communistic in nature. And yes, it has made Chinese empires very stable. It has made Indian dynasties very stable. But it hasn't produced a lot of creativity. This is why when the creative boom of Europe started with the Reformation, the Renaissance, these people were so easily dominated other people in the world. And they weren't good, but the systems that they created were better for creation, better for generating ideas that worked. The problem is that they weren't used wisely in most cases. They weren't used with an idea of or any understanding of karma. And they were used to control, dominate, profiteer. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen in Eastern philosophy either. It definitely did happen. The Chinese dynasties, China was weak in the last dynasty because there was so much corruption, because there were so many people profiteering from each other, taking advantage of the poor people, exerting warlord power over their little fiefdom, which is essentially how the Chinese Communist Party works now. Each lower level party official, each local party head of each province is like a little king, and they think they can get away with anything as long as they pretend like they're doing what Beijing says and make it look enough like what they've been demanded to do by the higher government that it looks like they're following the dictates of the party at the top. Well, this is all crumbling around them right now. You're not hearing most of it because most of the news getting out of China is state propaganda. But the country is literally falling apart. Much faster than my own country is falling apart. The United States or Europe is falling apart. Or Russia is falling apart. You just hear a very stilted narrative because the folks that make the news want you to hear that side of the story. They want to destroy your country. They want to destroy every country. They want to run the world like a big corporation, a big cartel, where a few people, the World Economic Forum kind of people, sit in a room and decide what's right for everybody else and force it down their throat through control of the media and control of the police and control of every polity in the world. This is what they want to do. This is the new world order that you hear talked about. And this little group of people, some people call it a cabal, they're not unified. They're not all on one page. They're being manipulated by higher forces, and those higher forces are not all on one page. There are aliens that are good guys, and there are aliens that are bad guys, and there are aliens in between that are just as out of touch and out of, a lot of aliens are atheists. They don't believe there's anything like a God. Oh, humans thought we were gods. Isn't that dumb? Well, They were once humans, stupid humans too. Stupid God-level species who became conscious enough to develop technology. Technology which eventually replaced their spiritual technology. And some of the aliens still have a lot of spiritual technology. Those are the ones most afraid of coming to this planet, by the way, because they don't want to catch karma. They don't want to catch reincarnation. They want to live forever and maintain their power. That's why the tall grays send the small grays on missions here, and they don't often interact with us in the physical world. The one I interacted with was in the spiritual world. And I know now that this entity who told me, "You've been given a great gift, use it wisely," has its own agenda. I later on met another key personages. You know, I've had relatively few direct spiritual encounters. Some people see ghosts all the time. I've experienced the flitting impression of the ghosts that visit my wife. She sees a lot of ghosts, and it's fairly common in this culture. I guess ghosts feel more welcome in the Muslim world than they do in the Christian world. The Christian world tends to view any of these things as demonic possession and want to put you in an institution or call the exorcist to drive out the demons from you. Here it's kind of considered a fact of life that there's spiritual entities at work, known as jinn in some parts of the world, that are entities that have some spiritual powers but are living a different reality than the people, normal people, and are all subject to Allah, which is the way I like to think of the Muslim God. It's kind of a male impersonation of Karma, who is, to my way of thinking, the goddess of all law. Any rate, do I have anything more I need to really tell you about my life? How I came to this point of telling you these things, hoping that somebody's going to listen? The one thing that I've been very sure of, and what drove me to write the first book, is a sure knowledge that my life is somehow a special life. When I die, it's going to be the end of this day 7 of creation and the beginning of the next. And in fact, it will signal a time where the deaths of every human after that point is going to be in this new system that I tell you about. This new, more free system of karma's governance, where universes start separating, no longer bound and allowed to affect each other. We won't have the gods of black holes coming to work in our universe. They will be free to go roam in a larger space, not bound by this universe or the anti-universe. What's that going to look like? I don't know. There's going to be some interesting science coming out of it. Maybe the nature of it will be that they still seem to be within this universe, but they have... Maybe we're already in it. Maybe the black hole is all that there is to it. I don't presume to know everything about black holes. I know that they're a very important part of creation. I'm pretty sure that they represent the enclosure of the universes of new gods. New gods promoted within the system of reincarnation and karma that I tell you about. Are they good? Are they bad? What's their agenda? Can they affect the outside world? Well, we know that they do have some sort of radiation that they produce. Is that produced by the black hole, or is it produced by the matter being sucked into the black hole, and it's what's being rejected by the black hole is not in my universe? I don't know. I don't presume to know that. Maybe I'll get a revelation about that sometime, and I'll start telling people about that. That's not my goal. I don't think it's useful. I think it's useful if scientists get to discover on their own. I'm not going to go push on the scientists working on consciousness research or AI to change their opinions, change their ideas, change their experiments to prove what I am pretty sure is the truth. It's going to come in its own good time. And my times with this Loki presence have shown me that if I push something out that's not ready to be out, I'm going to get punished for it. And I don't like being punished. I don't like not being in control of my body and my mind. I don't think anybody else likes to either, who's ever experienced that. And so I share what I'm able to share. If I start coughing uncontrollably, maybe I'm getting too close to something somebody doesn't want me to share. If I get suddenly committed to the mental hospital again for 2 weeks, okay, that's really putting me incognito for a while, and it's probably serving some purpose. I know I'm here to do what I need to do, and I do it. And I'm going to keep doing it and try to focus on that and focus on my sanity as opposed to making a lot of money. I'm thankful for collecting Social Security. I'm thankful for living in a country where it's possible to survive on Social Security. I'm going to try to keep... I've got a legal battle going right now. My second ex has taken half my Social Security, putting in a child support order that should have been defunct at the point that she started collecting the child benefit of my Social Security for our daughter. So, I have my challenges today. We have a new son, Mikhail, who is having trouble getting American citizenship, even getting a birth certificate. God, Sharia law sucks. Let me tell that to my Muslim brethren. Your Sharia law is full of shit. It's got a bunch of crappy laws that put people down for reasons that they shouldn't be put down for. So here's the situation. Our son was conceived before we were married. And in the West, I mean, if we were in the United States, I had married a woman that was pregnant, and we had a child. Nobody would question whether that child was mine, even if it wasn't mine. I'm taking responsibility for it. I'm going to raise it as a father. And nobody's going to challenge that. Well, here in Indonesia, under Sharia law, you can't be on the birth certificate, the official birth certificate, because you're not the real father. Fuck you, Sharia law. I married this woman when she had been abandoned by her ex and nearly forced into an abortion, which is illegal in Indonesia, by the way. But rich assholes can force their concubines to get aborted any time. And the law is going to look the other way. And yes, there are dual systems of justice everywhere, particularly in the Muslim world. And that is a sin. That is a real sin. And Allah will get you for that. You may think you're perfectly righteous in what you're doing and punishing the evil women in your society for promiscuity. That ain't the way it works, folks. That's not the real God you're following. You're following the false gods of Muslim doctrine, of Sharia law. You go look in the Quran for Sharia law. Look at where it came from, if you dare. The principles that Allah gave, that Muhammad gave you in the Quran are very, very loose. Much looser even than the Ten Commandments, which is in the part of the Bible that Muslims believe. You are people of the book too. Muhammad absolutely quotes both the Old and New Testament frequently. Their only difference with Christianity is in thinking that, well, Jesus was a prophet, not the prophet, not a God, a prophet, like the other prophets before. Your only difference with my belief is, in fact, that I say prophets were all living Messiah lives. Many other people live Messiah lives. They live Messiah lives of science, Einstein, Hawking. They live Messiah lives of music, Beethoven, Mozart, Mahler. They live Messiah lives of administration, Alexander the Great, Napoleon. Those kind of Messiah lives can be very dark, but they accomplish things in the world that are necessary. Joan of Arc. If not for her, the 100 Years' War might have gone on for another 100 years, and France wouldn't be the wonderful country it is today. Might not even be one country. Germany might not be one country if not for a lot of things that happened. Wouldn't be the country it is if not for Hitler. The state of Israel wouldn't exist if not for Hitler. We wouldn't have awakened to the dark side of fascism if not for Hitler. The dark side of communism if not for Stalin. Things happen for a reason. They don't have to happen that way. There's always a better way that history could have been plotted. But because the prime timeline is not dictated by the divine plan, God doesn't dictate the divine plan. God suggests, I think this is the way that we want to end up. Help me move in that direction. And when he wakes up from reincarnation amnesia and looks around and says, you know what, I think this is a good save game. This is a good starting point for future experiments. That's what happens. A new prime timeline gets set. A new future gets set. The past becomes more solidified. And we move on to another day of creation. When I die, I don't know what's so special about me, but when I die, we're going to start this next day of creation. It might look like nothing happened to you, but things will change. Things are already changing in the heavens. People are already getting new experiences. This is one of the reasons why I recommend you follow the work of Dolores Cannon. At least in the early part of her journey, becoming a regression therapist, doing hypnosis, hearing what people remembered that wasn't part of their current life experience, she learned a lot. And at least for the most part, faithfully recorded what she was hearing. And she noted that, you know, when she first started doing this, most of the past life experiences were pretty mundane previous lives as a human in a different time, a different era, a different life. And more she started hearing new stories that were kind of like, well, I don't know if this is past or future. And I can't tell you which of those were true or not. Whether at some point Dolores kind of got off the rails and became a celebrity and started feeding her mythology and inserting her mythology into the truth that was coming out. But I think I'm a pretty good judge of truth, and I listen to a lot of her content, and I think for the most part she has been quite sincere in what she's done, and is merely reporting what she's heard and not trying to interpret it or trying to force it into a religion, unlike some of her followers who have continued her work since she died. So I'm not going to really go in that. I've probably talked too long now, and I'm getting back talking about things that I really should be separate sessions. But I really hope that if there's something you want to know about my life, you want to know, have I did this, did I have that experience? I think I've touched on enough to give you a sense of who I am and why I'm teaching what I'm teaching, for better or worse. And that's that. I've got my mission. I don't know how long I'm going to live, and I'm at the point where, there are wonderful things in my life. I found this new marriage and a child and this new home and this extended family that I'm part of that can be annoying at times. It's kind of strange having relatives walk in anytime they want and, okay, we've got to change whatever we're doing and entertain relatives, get some drinks and get out some snacks and sit around and chew the fat, even though I don't really speak much Bahasa, so it's all like, what's going on here? This is fun, but it's not perfection, but I'm really happy now. But if it all came crashing down tomorrow, and it might, my bank card could stop working tomorrow, the U.S. could fall, and suddenly nobody gets their Social Security checks anymore. Maybe they start coming down on people that are expressing opinions that they don't like. Persona non grata. That's happening to a lot of people in the United States. There's witch hunts, witch burnings going on right now among the people that were the more disconnected with the establishment. Folks in the Trump administration are being demonized, are being attacked, are being vilified. And like I've said many times, I don't know that Trump is that great a person, but he's done good. Much of what his administration did exposed a lot of the lies and corruption that were going on in the deep state, exposing a lot of the un-American activities going on in the American government, which has been infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party, which has been infiltrated by the World Economic Forum, who have their own agenda of a perfect world. And I don't like that perfect world they're trying to bring. I've lived through this pandemic. I've avoided vaccination in a country that a month after I got here, trying to go somewhere where I didn't have to be vaccinated, started vaccinating people and requiring that you got a vaccination or you couldn't travel, you couldn't go in the mall. Well, luckily, it's a country where a lot of people already are very suspicious of government and of global corporations, of the West or of China, and they see what's going on and I'm not gonna play that game. And this is one of the nice things about living in Indonesia. It's a lot like China was before the Chinese Communist Party. They've seen regime after regime, empire after empire. They've got a, quote, democratic government now, but they know that government is corrupt, that the people are in it, that you're lucky to get a president like they currently have that at least seems to have some of his head screwed on right and isn't totally doing the bidding of Western corporations or the Chinese Communist Party or the U.S. military-industrial complex. He's trying to thread a fine line. Building a new capital in Borneo, is that a good idea? Well, I don't think throwing Jakarta under the bus is a very good idea. I don't think it's going to work. I think it's going to be a big waste of money trying to build this new capital. And it's really kind of funny to me to see this going on, because Jakarta is in many ways emblematic of Indonesia's independence movement. The Dutch were not the worst colonial taskmasters ever. They were very mercantile, very focused on exploiting the resources of Indonesia, but they pretty much left people alone, and that's why the traditional Muslim culture is thriving in Indonesia, as opposed to militant Islam that is going on in what were former French and British colonies and former parts of the Soviet Union. The areas being disputed by China. It's the whole reason they're so afraid of the Uyghurs, because they know that Islam has a power of community that can defy communism, that can defy globalism. This is why so much of the world is being fed propaganda that demonizes Muslims. Let me tell you, Muslims are not bad people. The religion is not bad. The religion is not a religion of hate. It's a religion of love and community and charity. And I've seen that firsthand. I live in it. My family is Muslim. I am Muslim. I'm an Omnist Muslim now. Just like I was an Omnist Christian. Once I came upon Omnism, all religions made sense to the extent that they had any truth in them. And I'm an Omnist Hindu. I'm an Omnist. The only religion of the major religions I really don't have much use for is Buddhism, frankly. I think it's a lazy, elitist religion that doesn't have much value in it. Doesn't have much value. It's very self-focused, self-centered, and it doesn't really give a very good basis for community. You look at Buddhist monasteries, and I don't think they're very healthy places. I don't think they're any more healthy than Christian monasteries, Christian abbeys, segregating male and female and putting them in this ascetic environment. Maybe some people like that. Pie Jesu Domine. I don't know. I think it's unhealthy. I'm with Monty Python on religion in many ways. I love Life of Brian. I love the Holy Grail because it pokes fun at the idiocy of religious dogma. Do I pray? Yes. Do I take communion? In a way, I guess my love of red wine and bread and cheese, those are kind of my communion. There are things that I love that come from my French and Dutch. You know, the interesting thing I didn't mention is I took a DNA test once. And by my knowledge, I'm, let's see, 3/8 Dutch, 1/8 German, a quarter Norwegian, and a quarter French. I took a DNA test, and it said that I was almost 50% English, British. I don't know where that came from. Other parts seem, like southern France. The French showed up, some Scandinavian. Just generally, Middle Europe was the other half. That more or less made sense. But there was nothing regarding Holland or Germany in my DNA analysis. It was all British. I've often wondered where that came from, whether the test was bad. I ordered another test once thinking I would do it, but it was during one of my kind of phases of inspired delusion, I would call it, and I accidentally ordered this kit and didn't change my address from the address in Florida where we'd been living when I'd last done a DNA test. And so the kit got shipped to my old address in Florida, and I never followed it up. I never took a second test. I know that I've been getting a lot of swab tests and a lot of blood tests since in my travels, and I'm sure somebody has my DNA, has been analyzing it, and has it organized and archived according to the way they want to look at it. In who knows? Certainly in communist China, they've got my DNA. They've got many samples of it from my time living there. Lord knows what they're going to do with it, what they're going to make of it. I sometimes wonder if my second life was assigned to me as a mission, which the Communist Party does do. They have entire schools, universities, they call them normal universities, where the students are the best and brightest of small farming villages and stuff like that in the parts of China you don't see. And they're allowed to come and study in a program that basically emphasizes two things: party ideology and foreign languages. That's all they teach in those universities. And they raise these kids, a lot of them, incidentally, females selected not only for intelligence, but for looks. And encouraged to be the hospitality force of the Communist Party, who give all the tours, who are assigned as interpreters to visiting businessmen, to visiting celebrities, who are assigned to people that start community theaters to get involved. And I certainly got involved. I married one of them. Started out so interested in our theater company and had no interest in theater once she got to the United States. Started out being such a loving, wonderful companion, and turned into a harridan that's harrying my life still with legal actions, trying to force me to only see Eloise on her turf, on her conditions, who has committed me to a mental hospital for nothing worse than shitting on her couch accidentally, and not raising our daughter the way that she thought I should raise her. She wanted to dictate how much time that she could spend viewing media each day, a horribly small amount, and then she would come home and put her in front of trash media from China. I mean, you should see the kind of crap they feed kids. It's really just dystopian. There's stuff on the channel. I recommend a channel called China Uncensored, or ADV Podcast, or Serpent ZA, to learn something real about China, because most of what you're hearing about China, the mainland, is bullshit. Absolute bullshit. They're feeding kids weird shit in their indoctrination programs. And they're starting to feed kids there the same sort of stuff that they're feeding this gender dysmorphic evil thing. I mean, there was a children's book in China that's now been withdrawn that had bulges in the boys' pants, sitting right next to a girl like they were getting an erection. Really weird shit like that. So it's like there's this dystopian cultural Marxist change coming over the world, and it's affecting, it's creeping into the Communist Party, and this is a large part of why Xi has become more militant, has started instituting things that are more like the Mao era, because he sees, whoa, what's happening to China? We thought we were conquering the West with our ideology, but they actually are infiltrating us with the worst part of the West, what we didn't want. the cultural influences that we didn't want. They were all happy that, now most of the budding stars of classical music and opera and, high culture is coming from China. And Asia in general has a great, for a while, greatly appreciated the influence of Western culture. And now they're getting these new messages of, oh, now Western culture is bad. That happened before in the Cultural Revolution. If you watch a really good movie to watch, is called The Red Violin. It didn't get a lot of attention, probably because it painted the communist regime in China in a very poor light. Part of the journey of this violin, it's about this violin that essentially got its own soul through the guy who made it and the death of his wife in the making of this violin. And the basic premise is that the soul of the wife now inhabits this violin because he used part of her blood in the stain that he painted the violin with. And wonderful story, wonderful spiritual story. I'm not going to tell the whole story. Maybe that's a subject for a whole nother episode, but it's one of my top recommended movies for anybody who is interested in how I came about this path. Right up there with The Life of Brian, Monty Python, and some of the books of Kurt Vonnegut I refer to frequently. Hugely influential in my path. May mean nothing to you, but they were very important to me. And even if they were told from, a standpoint that I don't agree with, an atheist standpoint, and Vonnegut definitely was an atheist person, but he's one of my favorite writers because he wrote spiritual stories from an atheist standpoint. And this is why, I don't tell you not to follow other things, not to do what you're doing, not to have your beliefs. It may be useful for your path. I am going to tell you the truth, though. And I'm going to point out when you're clinging to a lie, a delusion that eventually is going to burst a bubble, create cognitive dissonance that is going to cause you harm. This is what I do when Rob sounds very negative. He's like he's attacking this, attacking that. I'm sorry, you have to be negative sometimes when you see people in a delusional state, in a cognitive dissonant state that is a bubble that's going to burst. Economic bubbles are the same thing. These happen from Wall Street geniuses getting into a delusional state. CEOs of big companies becoming delusional in moving their businesses to China and helping to destroy them. I've been part of that, as I told you. I witnessed the demise of Hewlett-Packard as what started out as a wonderful spiritual company started by two engineers, very non-spiritual guys, but they had a vision together of making this company, making good stuff, making the things they needed to get geeky things done, needed instruments to test what was going on, to measure what was going on, to do experiments. And that's how Hewlett-Packard got started. Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett had a vision. They lived Messiah lives, starting this great corporation, Hewlett-Packard, that got progressively destroyed after the two men started disconnecting. They got older, they wanted to spend more time with their family. Actually, they both died, and I saw this great organization turn into a dystopia. Just like I'm sure if people got to live through the initial fervor of Christianity to what the Catholic Church became in the Middle Ages, during the age of the Inquisition and so forth, the Crusades, would just be like, oh my God, how did we get to this point out of something so beautiful? As a Muslim, How did we get from the wonderful teachings of how to have a better spiritual life than the church militant, the Catholic Church, was giving the Middle East at the time, giving them a choice to be between, okay, you can keep pursuing your old religion, or you can come join the in crowd and get the benefits of civilization in Damascus, in Antioch, in the big cities of the East, in the Byzantine Empire of the time. That was the milieu that Islam started within. And Islam was a backlash to Christianity. It was, to a large extent, a backlash to Christianity's one God idea. It kept the one God idea, but it kept this idea of jinn as other spiritual entities, not like the saints, which, the saints are all good, and anything else is a demon that needs to be cast out, is an evil other religion that needs to be attacked. Islam kept the idea of one God, but a God of love, a God of laws, of good ideas, good practices that you should try to follow in your life. God, it didn't even last a couple of generations before people started using it as a religion of control. Saying, oh, well, what Muhammad really meant was this. And that's how Sharia law was created. That's how the militant Islam that we sometimes see was created. That's how the oppressive Islam that does some really dark things to women and boys has not done very well in dealing with the conflict of the sexes. Admit it, Islamic world. Now, here in Indonesia, it actually seems fairly healthy. I've commented on it elsewhere. There does seem to be an element of the Sharia law here that actually is trying to protect women and give them options when they're in abusive relationship. So I'll credit that and encourage you to explore the fact that Islam is not all bad. It's not a bunch of terrorists. It's not a horrible thing that needs to be stamped out. No religion is. And the people that are saying that, well, all religion is bad, and what religious freedom really should be is freedom from religion. If you run across somebody like that, you're running across a very dark, dark person, an evil person. And I don't mind telling you that. You are pursuing an evil agenda if you think religion is evil. If you think the traditional religions of the world are the problem, and you need to solve it with communism, with atheism, you're falling down the same dark, dark path without any guidance. Because religion at least gives you a moral framework. Atheists say that, oh, we're moral, we have a moral framework. No, you don't. You don't. You think you do because you have your own moral code. Because atheists think there is no higher thing to answer to, so I can make up my own rules. Well, and I have to operate within the rules of society, so I have to do the right things from the law standpoint, but I can work around it if it's a very flexible morality that atheism gets you into. And to some extent, that could be something fairly positive. If the law that you're operating within is actually oppressive and something bad and change is needed, you could be the one driving change, but you're doing it from a standpoint of, I decide what's right. I. An atheist is an I worshiper. Anyone who could be so presumptuous as to think that they knew that God didn't exist, that the spiritual world was all a bunch of bunk, that anybody who has any spiritual beliefs at all is an idiot. That is a very self-centered person, right? An egotistical person, an I person. They worship themselves. Everybody worships something. Everybody has a God. Everybody has an idea of what the most important thing is, what the divine plan should be. You cannot listen to me and honestly say that's not true for you. To some extent, worship of any religion is an I thing. I know God, so I know what's right. How many Christians have you heard? Or I know Jesus. Jesus guides my life, so whatever I do is right. This is the challenge. And I'm just as subject to that as anybody else. I have an ego. I admit it. I'm honest about it. I have strong feelings. And I don't try to hide those behind virtue signaling. I'm open and honest about the mistakes I've made. I'll tell you about all the stupid things I've done, all the things I wish I haven't done. My spouses have hated me for being so honest because they don't want me to talk so freely about a lot of things. Just my nature. I'm a truth guy. And through my spiritual journey, I've become even more of a truth guy. And that's how Omnism works. It's sorting out the truth. But you don't have to reject everything to come to the truth. If you automatically reject contrary information, you are becoming a dogmatist. That is not a truth person. That is a dogmatic person. This is the way science has happened. Most scientists are not truthers. They are dogmatic pursuers of their narrow vision of science. This is what got us COVID, the COVID vaccines, all the idiocy that's happened in the pandemic, people claiming is science. Many of them don't know better. Many of them think, well, the ultimate goal is a universal vaccine for everything, and we have to take risky steps to get there. So we'll just make up a story about all our failings, all our false steps, so that we don't lose the overall path towards the superhuman race. This is how many of these elitist people think. And this is them believing they are gods. And some of what I preach may encourage that, because I'm telling you that you can all be gods, but you got to do it within the context of karma. And if you become a bad god, a god that nobody else wants to play with, you're going to get a universe that nobody wants to go. You're going to be sitting in your little black hole playing with your virtual soul toy soldiers for eternity. This is my message. This is my truth. How do I know? I know. Am I absolutely certain I'm correct? No. If I get information that is going to lead me into a different conclusion, especially good, solid scientific information that's well documented, well experimented, yes, I will modify my beliefs to include that new information. One of those pieces that I've added recently was trying to understand. I considered the possibility. I've been concerned, like many physicists are, when they hear about matter and antimatter, why we have a universe of matter, and there doesn't seem to be places in this universe of antimatter. That's been a very interesting thing. And when some scientists finally came out and said, well, we're finding actually evidence that maybe there is, that we are part of a universe pair, and the other universe was the antimatter universe. I started thinking about that. How does that come about? Why would that come about? What possible purpose does it serve in a creation that I knew was all about making worlds, new environments for souls to learn and grow in, to test their creations instead of just saying, I'm right, this is the way it is, and making something that falls apart in, a few hours or a few days or a few years, which is kind of like fantasy worlds are. This is why Tolkien, the greatest fantasy author, arguably, ever, never was really successful past the trilogy of the Rings. He always wanted to write a grander history of Middle-earth, but it didn't seem to work. And if you read the other works that are published by him, or completed by his son, you'll see that they just don't have this same sort of cohesiveness and continuity of the Lord of the Rings story, the same appeal. And this is how Tolkien's universe probably is. It's an ephemeral universe that embodies this great concept of Middle-earth that kind of falls apart in its early history and falls apart in its late history. And this is how a fantasy universe would look. And this is a place you can go. It's got a lot of spiritual energy tied up in it because it's such a popular work in our universe and other universes that are watching our universe. It has a life of its own, and that's kind of what happens when you live a Messiah life. Tolkien was a Messiah of literature, of fantasy. There is a universe that exists because of the work he did. And it still inspires people. It's still a place of dreams. A place that, that's why, people will be reading things like The Lord of the Rings, or they will be watching The Matrix or some other movie, and it just hits them a certain way as, wow, something about this really resonates with me. This is why I often bring up Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Kind of a silly movie, silly 80s movie, but this whole idea of what's happening now, fixing a future, and the ability of folks to come back from the future and sort of defend their past. This is actually true. This is sort of what happens with time. Each day of creation is a timestamp, a major timestamp in the prime universe. This sets the future, solidifies the past more. Can still make changes. You can still start a universe at another save game and see if you can play it out to a better place. If the judges of the multiverse like it, it works better, they'll kick it up to the next higher level of judges, and eventually karma and God will look at it and say, you know what, that is better than the idea I had. Let's make that the prime universe. But, the days of going back to square zero are never going to happen again. You can play games in the past. You might find minor changes that will be allowed to happen because they don't affect the grander future of the multiverse. And that's why so many people are passionate about studying the past and getting to the truth of the past. Because it does have a use. You can make some minor changes. And you can learn a lot about how to make changes in the future. Those who study the past are most likely to be chosen as the servants in the spiritual world of the goddess of time. The organization that has control over, very tight control over making changes in the past. Allowing folks to come from the future to study or help with changes to the present or the past that may be deemed necessary to make this future. So this is time is a string. This is something physicists can relate to. String theory. Strings the vibration of strings. That's how time works. You have a timeline, which is the core. Its vibration is setting a pattern that is a result of the past pattern and creates a pattern going forward. The future already exists, but it exists somewhat ephemerally. It can change. But we don't want to allow it to change too much, because the future is set by the divine plan of the prime universe, and that's where the changes that eventually affect the whole multiverse are made. The laws of physics and chemistry eventually have to come due in other universes. So even fantasy universes like Tolkien's have a very limited timeline, because eventually you get to a place where it falls apart. It doesn't adhere to the laws of the multiverse. And this is the difference between a fantasy universe and the prime universe, between the universes of other gods and the universe that is not God's own personal universe. Experiments on his own, and he's got to play the game like everybody else, contributing, getting approval from all the other senior creators to integrate it in this prime universe. The prime universe is the universe of Lucifer, the devil of the details. You got to play the game there first before and get some permanence there before your ideas become anything more than something that works in your own universe. Now, Lucifer is kind of an interesting cat. I don't know exactly how, but he's managed to play this game in a way that allows him to have many, many universes, because he kind of runs his team straddling the purity of God and the impurity of Borg. Borg thinks perfection is having control of everything. Borg gave us all of the laws of physics. All the limitations that we face are, whoa, this thing should be just this way, particles should act this way, and never be given a chance to have, these fancy-ass decisions that will set the whole thing on end. This is Borg thinking. I don't want to change anything because it's already perfect. If you believe in a God of perfection, if you believe that everything was perfect after the 6 days of creation, and anything that happened on the 7th day while God was sleeping is the fault of anybody but God, well, this is kind of falling into the Borg / Luciferian camp of my perfection is the only perfection. That's why the prime universe is a place of imperfections. It could be better, maybe, if more of the God team had been listened to more often. Maybe even if the Borg team had been listened to more often. But it's a balancing act. And Lucifer is kind of the holder of the scales. He can't really tip them so much because his power becomes more and more limited in this universe where he thought he was going to, this is the thing about God's volunteer was, like his most ass-kissing child. God's always right. I'm the oldest child. I've fought him too much. I'm going to be on his side from now on. This was the kind of cat that the Lucifer soul was. Brown Noser Extreme volunteered to be the first soul to try out incarnation in this physical world, to be the embodiment of the positive universe. while Borg's volunteer was, somebody that he knew he could completely control and mind fuck, if you will, and that was the anti-universe. They were not perfect souls. God's universe is not run by a perfect soul. It's run by a very ambitious soul that sucked up to God and volunteered to be the God of the prime universe. Doesn't have that much power anymore because so many things are out of his control. He's basically, got ownership of this boundary around prime universe, which is very similar to the boundary around a black hole. The laws of that are getting condensed down to what a black hole can or can't do. That's why I'm all for study of black holes. Figure out how they work, what they can or can't do, because you are basically researching the boundaries of universes. And the more you codify the laws, the more you observe of what can or can't happen, is what's driving those universes being able to influence each other in the material sense. And we don't want influence to happen in the material, because that's how we have the prime universe being beset by demons and entities trying to play their mind game agendas with these stupid human beings and get in the way of the divine plan. And this is the truth of a lot of what's going on. Whether you call them saints, whether you call them jinn, whether you call them my spiritual guides, these spiritual entities have agendas too. And they don't necessarily mesh with your best interests. They don't necessarily mesh with the best interests of the divine plan. They may be working against it, trying to delay, trying to make, I don't know, maybe some of them want me to live forever, and they're working to change my DNA back to the point where it's like the version of humanity that lived for 1,000 years we hear about in the Bible. Or making me into one of the Anunnaki so I can live for an even longer period of time and make this seventh day of creation last longer. Some would like me to just die tomorrow and get this over with. We've got all the souls we need in our universe. Thank you. I don't know what's going on with this. I just know what I know. And I tell you what I know, and I'm honest about it. I don't know why I was selected. I don't know exactly the details of all my past lives. I'll tell you about the ones I'm familiar with. I don't have a desire to go dig more. Okay, this is one thing I'll leave you with. After the ayahuasca experience and writing my book, I still felt like, you know what? It would be interesting to try this regression therapy, hypnosis, and just see what else I might learn about any important past lives I've had. So I went to a guy that practiced this, living up in the Colorado mountains. I don't know, maybe he must have been pretty good at it because he had a pretty nice place up there in the mountains, and obviously did pretty well for himself. I didn't ask him his background, but I think he was a good practitioner. And this state that I got into was kind of weird. It wasn't deep hypnosis like I mentioned that hypnosis program that resulted in my weird first day with Loki. No, this was a very shallow hypnosis, and it was just like memories were coming back. He took me back into 3 past lives. I don't know what stimulated them. I don't know why they came in the order they did or anything, but I know that the memories that came up were very, very real. The first life he took me back to was I saw myself on very alien planet, very dark place, with the light in broad sunlight was like a purplish haze. Very, very dark planet, and I was in a species of cat-like creatures, very definitely alpha predators. And I was like the leader of the pack. Very, very fierce killer, very fierce hunter. And he took me forward to an important moment in this life. And I had broken a leg. I was no longer able to be the leader of this pack. And I experienced being eaten by my family. Eaten alive. And the odd thing was, I was sitting there and being eaten, and I didn't really have any feeling about it. It was like, this is just normal. This is the morality of my society. And I knew I was going to die, and I knew I was being consumed by my family, and it didn't really have any strong attachment. I wasn't crying or screaming or thrashing. It was just, I'm being eaten. Okay. The second life he took me back to, I was running. I was some kind of a velociraptor-ish dinosaur kind of creature. Half bird, half dinosaur. A little bit like an ostrich, maybe, or I don't know. I couldn't quite describe it, but my feet were hot. I was burning up, and I was missing my mother because something weird had just happened, and the world was destroying itself all around me. And I was running desperately, trying to figure out what to do in this new world that had suddenly become so horrible. And I was absolutely there. I don't know how it ended, because he took me out of it, because it was so emotionally charged that I was like, I'm guessing that he thought I was going to lose it and maybe just have a psychotic event right there from the emotion of this moment. I don't know what I was going through, but I think maybe it was that big cataclysm that killed the dinosaurs. And I have a feeling that I was one of the smart dinosaurs of the time, the human reptilians, who had a real society, who had a civilization. And that meshes with a lot of what I've heard in the spiritual community, and these folks that are looking into the past and talking about this relationship to the future and what the reptilian agenda is. I can tell you that there was a species, and at least at the point that they'd gotten where I experienced it, they were flightless reptiles, maybe half birds. Maybe they were capable of evolving quickly into birds. This is part of that DNA. Anyway, I wasn't evolving that quickly in that life, and I didn't get out of it without knowing where it went. He brought me out and said, well, let's try to find something else, some other life. And went through his procedure for like he said, envision floating in the clouds, and formless, floating around like a cloud, and you decide to descend somewhere. Let me know where you descend. That was kind of the method he used. I don't know exactly. I don't think I'd be good at being this kind of a practitioner. I don't know if it's a form of magic or what. Maybe some people have it, some people don't. I suspect it works that way. Any kind of a spiritual gift does work that way. But in this third segment of the experience, I came down and I was a bearded figure. I've never liked growing a beard. I've never grown a beard very long in my life. Every once in a while, I put on one for a few weeks till it starts itching like hell, and then I shave it off. But I had this big flowing beard, and the first experience in this life, I was, like a young man. I would describe it as kind of a Hercules or a young god on a young earth, and I was wandering around hunting and having fun with the animals and cavorting. I was a very sexual creature. I was screwing everything in sight and enjoying this life immensely. I think my father was some sort of leader of these people, and I was a very privileged child wandering around this planet we were on and finding so much joy in all the animals and flora and fauna I was fornicating with. And then he took me to a later point in this life, and I found myself in prison with the knowledge that my own family had put me in this prison. No contact with the outside world, no nothing. It's just totally encased like I'd done something horrible. And I realized that the horrible thing I'd done was all this fornication with the local flora and fauna. I'd done a bad thing and had created new life, new hybrid life through the kind of breeding that I guess I was capable of in that life, and it had caused problems. And eventually, at this point, I had become the leader of the community after my father, and the results of this interbreeding were causing problems. These hybrid species had started attacking the beautiful people and destroying them. And I was viewed as the scapegoat. It was under my father's watch that I started all this mischief, and under my watch that it came to fruition. And they decided to imprison me. They couldn't kill me, apparently. I don't know. This was some kind of a semi-immortal species that I was in. I just was in this prison thinking about how I got there and wondering how long I could possibly live. And that was the end of that session. Processing it afterwards, I had to kind of conclude that I had been one of these Anunnaki visitors, one of the more humanoid ones that maybe caused a lot of hybrid species to develop. I remember mating with all sorts of creatures, lions and things, and I think maybe I was the reason for. We've got in the human record, and especially in Egyptian mythology, you've got these therianthropic gods, half human, half animal. Apparently, in that life, I was the one that created all that mischief and was punished for it by imprisonment. And you hear the fallen angels who were imprisoned in the earth. I guess that was part of my story. Piecing it together with other things that I found out, I guess I've been a god before, a different kind of god, one that had a lot more power, a lot more abilities than we obviously have now. And that fit in with what I'd already written in my book, and gave me a perspective that kind of supported, I've been feeling that I'm kind of this Messiah character. I don't really, I think people are going to think I'm crazy saying this, but I've got to say it because it's something I feel strongly. and I have a strong feeling for the truth. Something special is going to come to an end and come to a beginning when I die. I'm just telling you what I know, what I've experienced, how I processed it. I don't claim to be the Messiah. I claim to be a Messiah. I claim to be part of a very important plan, part of getting past this day 7 of creation, which wasn't like the Bible told you it was like. Anybody that looks around the world knows it's not perfect. It's about becoming more perfect. It's about finding a new starting place for future perfections. This is what spiritual science is all about. This is what creation in a scientific sense is all about. This is what quantum mechanics is all about. Science is observing the properties of the multiverse, and in observing it, solidifying those properties. If you can repeat the same experiment 100 times, that's probably setting a law in place that we can now say, well, you know, we haven't, doing it 100 times doesn't necessarily prove it, and it's still called a theory. This is the way scientists are humble in what they do. They realize that just because you can flip a coin and it lands on heads 100 times doesn't mean if you flip it again, it isn't going to land on tails. But probabilistically, you're pretty sure that this is something that's going to happen the same way in the future. And this is how reality works. This is how spirituality works. Yes, you can change with spiritual energy what's going around you. People do it all the time. They have a vision, they have a dream, and they make that dream come true. Doesn't always happen. Now, the dream may come true for a short time, and then, you know, something happens and their life falls apart, and their followers leave them, and they end up destitute and broke in Skid Row, living on the street. That's another kind of Messiah life. It's about your own missions, but it's also about how it affects other missions. And some Messiah lives are serving a higher purpose. They can be very dark. Look at the life of Joan of Arc. Served the purpose of uniting a kingdom into a great nation, which then became sort of an evil nation under Napoleon and tried to conquer the world. Still was a Messiah life, still was an important part of the march of human history, a chosen species. Well, I've gone over 2 hours this time. I don't know if you're still listening, but I hope you found this interesting. I think you've learned a lot about my life and about my teachings, my beliefs, my surety that I have through my beliefs, through my spiritual experiences, my spiritual revelations, and I hope that they will help to you inform your path, inform your revelations, give you a better way to get through what I'm sure is going to be a very trying time for everyone. Till next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnism Hour. Like, share, subscribe, and interact in any way you like. I like to commune with souls. Take care.